This is an analysis of a new book out by Kai-Fu Lee, former head of Google China, who also worked at Apple and Microsoft. And now he runs a major Chinese venture capitalist firm. He's the guy who really helped establish Google in China. This qualifies him as a globalist due to the fact that we have seen from this year's Bilderberg meeting that technology is taking the leading role in ushering in global governance. And China especially is going to take the lead in this. Also, Google in general is a very transhumanist corporation with its Singularity University headed by Ray Kurzweil that they put on the land that's shared by the Google headquarters and NASA over in Mountain View, California. And also another former Google executive just established the first religion of transhumanism that literally worships AI. Transhumanism is the religion of the globalists, and the people high up in Google, they are globalists, and they're trying to set up technocracy in America. Really what this book shows, though, is that China is already ahead of the US in bringing in the New World Order, and Silicon Valley is now just beginning to implement what has already been implemented in China. There's been a lot of talk about the Chinese social credit score, but this book really fills in a lot of the details of how this will be the total tracking of everything. Everything will be controlled and manipulated using data science and artificial intelligence. The approach to artificial intelligence that Lee and most of mainstream AI use is what's known as deep learning. And as he will explain on page 7, it grew out of neural networks from the 1980s. Neural networks which had themselves grown out of cybernetics in the 1960s. Deep learning is the approach that most of the hype stories about AI in the media are usually talking about. Despite the hype, though, deep learning and neural networks in general are not true artificial intelligence. Neural networks are the materialist, evolutionary approach to AI, which views the brain as the result of the randomness and chaos of evolutionary history. And thus, much of the brain's architecture is redundant and non-essential. This is why the only thing neural networks have in common with actual brains is that they model neurons. There's actually simplistic versions of neurons called perceptrons. Neural network researchers figure they can engineer a better approach to creating intelligence than nature did. The true creation of artificial intelligence requires an actual understanding of how the circuitry of the brain, particularly the neocortex, which is the seat of intelligence, works. It requires understanding how the brain was designed. Deep learning is able to learn how to do a lot of useful things as long as it has been programmed to do that specific task. True intelligence is able to learn many things even if it wasn't specifically designed to do so. Still, deep learning is a powerful enough tool to do many of the things talked about in the rest of the book. In fact, the father of deep learning, Geoffrey Hinton, has stated that he thinks the technology will be used by political systems to terrorize people. And what Kai-Fu Lee will show in this book is that China is currently the political system in the best position to use this technology. On page 28, he mentions Deng Xiaoping and the economic reforms of the 1970s, which of course came after David Rockefeller's visit and his 1973 article in the New York Times, From a China Traveler, where he said China was one of the most important and successful social experiments. And it was right at this time that they implemented their one-child policy for population control as well. And it was also right at this time that America's manufacturing was moved to China. And that's when Walmart started dominating by selling cheap products made in China and put all of Main Street USA out of business. So, China is not a communist country, and it is not a capitalist country with Asian values, as the philosopher Slavoj Žižek would say. It's a dialectical synthesis between capitalism and communism. It's the third way, aka neoliberalism, aka globalism, aka, as the title of the book suggests, the New World Order. We also know that Mao was put in control of China by the globalists at Yale, and they're using it to take over from America the leadership of the New World Order. And a big reason for this is because, as Lee will say later in the book, China has an army of computer geeks who can create the smart grid infrastructure that the globalists need to create technocracy. Lee says the Chinese commitment to grunt work is what will make them leaders in the age of AI. And then on page 55, Lee says that data is the new oil, and therefore China is like Saudi Arabia. And what he means by this is that data is going to be the most valuable commodity now, and it will be what society is structured around instead of oil. Americans are used to having Silicon Valley track their online data, but China already has their offline activity being monitored as well. And that is what is going to come to America and to the rest of the world. The Internet of Things is going to completely restructure society, just as Rockefeller and Big Oil built society around their resource. Big Oil transformed cities from being built at the human scale to being built for cars. Now, cities will, and already are, be built for the sake of collecting data. While oil fueled the Industrial Revolution, data is going to fuel the AI revolution. And what this will lead to is a total surveillance state. And China's tech industry is better suited for deep learning because their apps don't just track online activity, they also track real-world activity, including physical purchases, meals, makeovers, transportation, etc. Basically, deep learning needs as much data as possible. The more data it has, the better it works. One of the big tech companies in China, Tencent, created a messaging app in 2011 called WeChat, which became a one-stop super app for people to give all their online and real-world data to. This is what Facebook is only just now trying to do with WhatsApp and their global online currency, Libra. He says people in China basically use it as a remote control for their lives. They use it for restaurants, ride-sharing, investments, doctor's appointments, food delivery, buying tickets, paying bills, live streaming, and more. And to do all of this, everyone has their banks linked to WeChat. So it's all cashless. He says WeChat has refashioned China's urban landscape into the world's richest datascape. But he points out this new infrastructure couldn't have been built without involvement from China's government. The Chinese government has created its own Silicon Valley. And by the way, America's Silicon Valley was also created by the government during World War II. Silicon Valley is not the creation of the free market, and neither is the Chinese Silicon Valley. But according to Lee, the 2014 World Economic Forum set the stage for the creation of China's answer to Silicon Valley. The government began heavily subsidizing technology entrepreneurs, leading to 6,600 new startups. They shifted the Chinese economy from a manufacturing-based economy to an innovation-based economy so that they could lead the New World Order in artificial intelligence-based global government. As China's President Xi Jinping has said, even though before 2014 the Chinese government was suspicious of the internet, they now fully endorse it. And this new infrastructure that's being set up will lead to what Lee is calling the online to offline revolution. On page 68 is where he mentions this term, and he says this is the digital world taking over the real world. So this is things like Uber and food delivery apps. And he says that China has embraced this much more than America. And you have the rise of what Jacques Attali called digital nomads. People who use their smartphones to go wherever the jobs are. They're not rooted in any specific location. And you have people using WeChat to hire people to do things such as clean their cat's litter and even pick up their kids from school, which is kind of creepy. But that's where we're heading, the service-based economy. And that's all part of sustainable development as well. And China is able to digitize everything because their tech workers are willing to get their hands dirty in all aspects of business, while Silicon Valley people in America have wanted to just sit in their towers. But again, the primary reason China has made this all possible is their widespread embracing of cashless payments. The majority of businesses use QR codes linked to their WeChat wallets to process payments. The Chinese had never fully accepted credit and debit cards, so they went straight from cash to mobile. They started using it in 2014, and by 2016, most shops in major cities used it. America, on the other hand, is having to be weaned off their credit cards slowly. with the whole chip system. On page 75, he even says that homeless people in China are hanging QR codes around their necks when they beg for money. And also, thieves are having trouble finding any actual cash to steal because everything is already cashless. Mobile payment transactions have passed $17 trillion, more than China's entire GDP. And the whole point of this online to offline revolution is the creation of the Internet of Things, which will lead to total information awareness. He says on page 77 that data from mobile payments is currently generating the richest maps of consumer activity the world has ever known, far exceeding the data from traditional credit card purchases or online activity captured by e-commerce players like Amazon or platforms like Google or Yelp. What follows logically from this is that the control of this amount of data will be able to make more accurate predictions about society than ever before. That is, those people who are in control of this data will be able to make more accurate predictions than ever before. And one of the major technologies that is really transforming Chinese cities is bike sharing. This is something that is just starting to catch on in America. For example, here in Texas, you can see bikes and scooters littering the ground all over Austin. But in China, bike sharing is already huge. Lee says in 2017, Mobike was logging 22 million rides per day, mostly in China, which was 4 times the amount that Uber was doing at the same time. These bikes have a bunch of sensors all over them that produce 20 terabytes of data per day. They see where people are going and who their friends and family are. All this data is tied to credit rating systems, which, as it has been widely reported, are not just financial rating systems, they're social rating systems. By 2020, China aims to enroll all of its citizens into a national database that incorporates not only financial, but also social and moral history. Then on page 78, in a section called Blurred Lines and Brave New Worlds, he says that China has been able to create this quote-unquote alternate internet universe due to the, and he has a list here of reasons why it's been able to create this universe. He lists market-driven entrepreneurs, mobile-first users, innovative super apps, dense cities, talking about megacities / smart cities, cheap labor, immigration, mobile payments, and a government-sponsored culture shift. Notice the first and last items on the list are basically describing capitalism and communism, which are both operating in China. The two ideologies are not enemies, they're actually dialectical tools used to engineer society towards the New World Order. In the next section of the book, he compares America and China as AI superpowers. He says China has the advantage when it comes to technology because the Chinese government has a techno-utilitarian political culture, meaning for the Chinese government the ends justify the means when it comes to achieving their goals. And what this actually means is that they actually have a moral imperative to reach their goals, even at the cost of lives, perhaps. Utilitarianism is typical ethics of transhumanists. If you look up the philosopher David Pearce and the World Transhumanist Association, which is now known as Humanity Plus, it's all utilitarianism. And when you see the ethics of AI as a topic being discussed at this year's Bilderberg meeting, that's what they mean by ethics. They mean utilitarian ethics. Then, another advantage he says China has is they have an army of computer geeks to implement the technology. So America doesn't have enough nerds. He then says, he gives what he calls the 7 giants of the AI era, and he says that they're split pretty evenly between America and China. And the 7 giants are Google, Facebook, Amazon, Microsoft, Baidu, Alibaba, and Tencent. I guess IBM and Apple didn't make the cut, But the giants that he listed are investing billions into AI and monopolizing the power grid of the AI age. However, they still have to work with governments in a public-private partnership so that they can do things like what Lee calls make city brains, which will use AI to optimize cities, which is actually exactly what IBM is trying to do. So I don't know why he didn't mention IBM here as one of the giants. Ultimately, though, he admits America still has the best thinkers in AI, but China is catching up because all AI research is online. And again, China just has a greater quantity of researchers as well. In fact, Lee says the amount of Chinese AI researchers has doubled since 2006, so they're basically raising an army of engineers. However, he admits despite all these resources and manpower going into AI, a new major breakthrough can tip the scales in favor of a single company. And that's exactly what I'm trying to do with my company. But in Kai-Fu Lee's opinion, Google has the best chance at a major breakthrough. And he says it is for the reason that they simply spend more money on AI than any other company, and even the US government. And they have around half of the top 100 AI researchers in the world. But again, I would argue all the money in the world can't fix incorrect philosophical presuppositions. And then on page 98, he gives the Chinese government's 10-year AI plan. So they have a 10-year plan. By 2020, they want to be a top-tier AI economy. By 2025, they want to achieve major new breakthroughs in AI. And by 2030, same year as UN Agenda 2030, they want to be the global leader in artificial intelligence. He then gives examples of where China is at with their AI right now. He says that there is a news website in China that uses AI to write news articles, and then the algorithms recursively tailor themselves to fit each individual user's personal biases. And people literally get addicted to this. And then it uses another algorithm to hunt down quote-unquote fake news. And then this news company is also the same company that also owns musical.ly, which is the app that all the teens are using right now. That's owned by a Chinese company. And there's also an app which uses AI to give out 2 million loans per month in China. And they determine whether someone's worthy of a loan based on such obscure data as the amount of battery someone has on their phone and how fast they type. And it does statistical analysis of these things to determine someone's trustworthiness. And then other things that AI is being used for already in China include medical diagnosis and courtroom decisions. And he says that the next step, now that the digital world has been brought into the real world, is to blur the lines between the two. And what will allow this is what Lee calls perception AI, which is the use of sensor-carrying smart devices to digitize reality. And he even admits on page 117 that Amazon's Alexa is there to spy on you. Of course it is. We already know this, but he says that it's digitizing your audio environment so that it can be analyzed by AI algorithms. And then he goes into a kind of a weird example of a grocery store of the future, where he says that you'll go into the grocery store and you'll grab a shopping cart, and the shopping cart is going to scan your face and know instantly who you are and what your usual purchases are. And then the grocery cart will self-drive itself around the aisles as you follow it, and you'll do your shopping. And he says that he wants his personal grocery cart to talk like Jennifer Lawrence. It's kind of weird. But he says that the Chinese are more quickly accepting all this technology because they are already used to being watched by their government. And the Chinese government has ordered the creation of a brand new AI city designed specifically for autonomous vehicles. Then on page 142, despite hyping it up for the rest of the book, he admits that deep learning is not real AI, and he thinks that real AI is not coming anytime soon. But what he does say is coming soon is people losing their jobs to machines. He says mass unemployment is inevitable, and he pretty much spends the rest of the book talking about this. He says the only jobs that are safe now are ones that rely on sensory motor skills, which are jobs that it would take real AI to do. And he says that the big tech companies will form monopolies and everyone else will be poor. People will be divided into two classes, the AI elite and the useless class. This will lead to an existential crisis for the useless class, and he says his near-death experience with cancer has shown him that the answer to this crisis lies in embracing love and compassion. And he suggests that people's value should no longer be determined by their economic performance, but by their social performance. So you would basically get paid based on what a good boy or girl you are. Of course, the obvious problem with this is that social performance is a pretty subjective metric. But I'm sure the AI will be able to help sort that out. And he says that since China will lead in AI, it will also lead in job loss to AI. But he says most Chinese people are in denial about this since they have been living in increasing prosperity since the economic reforms of the 70s. So these are basically Chinese boomers. And they even have their own American-style boomer towns being built as the suburbs of the major cities in China. So the older people in China are not concerned about the younger people's jobs being taken by AI, but the traditional jobs are going to go away. And people are going to have to become nomadic and use their smartphones to chase temporary jobs around. The other option is to become, rather than nomads, to become cave dwellers, digital cave dwellers, and retreat into a virtual reality. And Lee's solution to all this is for everyone to become, as I just said, more quote-unquote loving and begin deriving value not from their economic output but from their social output. So basically to become social justice warriors. He uses an interesting example of someone else calling for the same thing. On page 215, he talks about his trip to the most recent Davos. And Larry Fink was there telling the economic elite that companies need to begin taking broader social responsibilities. So that means sustainable development, the LGBT agenda, the green agenda, etc. Davos, by the way, is the same globalist meetup where they had a conference where they actually discussed if we have the right to our cognitive liberty. Or should our thoughts just be monitored? All this goes along with Facebook's new cryptocurrency, Libra, that is going to be the social justice cryptocurrency, where they're going to ban people from buying and selling if they determine that they are a quote-unquote hate agent. Finally, in the last chapter, our global AI story, Lee says that the global economic and social crisis that AI will bring will force everyone in the world to come together under one system. So in conclusion, it seems like Kai-Fu Lee is a true believer in the New World Order. He thinks the global scientific dictatorship will bring some challenges, but ultimately it will be a good thing. And he makes no mention of the fact that the Chinese government has already blacklisted over 13 million citizens using this exact same technology. Or that some of these untrustworthy citizens' organs are being harvested and sold. Or even that his former company, Google, helps to censor these dissidents with their customized search engine. So let me know what y'all think about all this. I have a lot more videos that I'm working on. I wanted to do more book reviews. I want to do some videos on actual AI theory and some discussing philosophy. So go ahead and subscribe to my channel. I'll have more content coming out. But until then, thanks for watching.